at the end of the day, if someone doesn't like it, they can always make their own podcast.
True story.
Yeah, it's cool. Don't worry. So thanks for coming. I appreciate it. I always love speaking to you. So welcome to this podcast. It's episode 2. Really early days, lots of mistakes to happen yet. So Colleen.
Yeah.
What are you doing here?
Well, I'm chatting with you, Adam, because every conversation we have seems to lead to solving some of the world's problems. And we have a habit of touching on topics that are what I would call stepping in the lava. They're triggering topics for a lot of people, but I think the two of us really raise some great questions surrounding some pretty serious conversations in society right now that people are criticized for, whether they're on one side of it or the other.
Yeah, it's that like, I think the centre's kind of dying. I mean, I saw it a few years ago. It's like over here in the UK, we've got Labour, which is quite left, and we've got the Tories, which are, I'd say they're more like kind of centre right, but then we've got new parties kind of coming up, like Reform, which is more right, and the Greens, which are quite left, and the centre's kind of dying a little bit. But at the same time, if people don't talk about it, people don't take a bit of flack, the centre is going to die. So I'm quite happy with meanies in the comment section. So let's crack on. Like, I'm cool with it. Yeah.
Same. And in all fairness, both sides have it wrong. So that's the nice thing about being in the middle.
Yeah, and the most diverse kind of response I can give is that it depends on your perspective of what's right and wrong, right? So, that's I can't, there's only like so much I can deal with, but let's talk about things honestly.
Yes.
Because that's, I think, the least in service we can do to those that suffer is to listen and talk about it frankly, and actually understand what's going on, rather than shoving it in a piece of paper on a table and leaving it to fester.
Yeah, exactly. So, I think when you're...
Tell me about... sorry, no,
go ahead.
No, you go for it.
No, I was just going to say...
I'm not cutting this out, by the way. I'm keeping this in. You go for it.
No, go for it. I was just going to say, I think a huge piece for those of us that are somewhat in the middle is having a solid moral compass. And you and I were talking about this previously, just about how quickly we fall into labels, especially in the school systems. It sounds similar in the UK than it is, how it is here as well. We're really quick to slap labels on people without understanding the entire picture, which includes their home life, what their life was like before they even got to school, what their life is like currently. I feel like in general, the education system just looks at what they're like in the classroom and it sort of stops there. So I know you can relate to that.
Yeah, no, I mean, when I was a kid, I was really loud in primary school, and then when I'd get home, it was not the case. And then secondary school flipped. I was quite loudish at home, and then very quiet in secondary school. And there were a multitude of reasons why. There was mostly negatives, but there were positives. But yeah, it's crazy. I don't know how someone meeting you for 10 minutes can diagnose you with something.
Exactly.
You don't know everything. Or even, an hour's consultation is to evaluate someone's complete mental state without knowing any of the surrounding factors is crazy. But that's where we're at. And whether people like to hear it or not, there is a lot of profit that can be made from, diagnosing people with things that may exist, but in a minor fashion where they don't need medication. They can CBT, train themselves. Or they do need the medication, in which case, that's just fair play. They need that. Or they haven't actually got any of the stuff at all. It's just symptoms that have been misevaluated. And there we are. But yeah, it's quite a pickle. So yeah. Okay. So I mean, just so our viewers can kind of, and listeners as well, can, because they might know who I am. I hope they do, otherwise they don't know what they're in for. But tell me a little bit about you. What's your deal, Colleen?
Well, I got into this nonprofit space last year, and this came after. I'll sort of start from the beginning. So I started my career as a hairdresser. And when you cut hair for a living and you work in the public sector, one thing in the US that we don't teach, which I have found out recently, is a piece of education for cosmetologists in other parts of the world, like Poland. They don't talk to you at all about psychology. And that is a major component to the work that we do. And I'll tell you why. It sounds strange. Like, what would a hairdresser need to know about psychology? But what you'll find is that when people sit down to get their hair done, rarely are they looking at their phone. It's one of the few appointments in their life where they are talking to you face to face or through the mirror. And almost like a bartender, they have a tendency to share things with you they would never tell even their own family members. And so I had no clue when I started out, 18, 19 years old, and I got into the beauty industry and I was doing hair and I was doing makeup, how much disclosure I was going to listen to. It never occurred to me that this was even a thing or that adults and children were going through this. And the more I started doing hair, the more I started hearing these patterns in everyone, men, women, children. I had no idea how much abuse was out there and how much trust was going to be built in doing their hair, whether that's the psychology of seeing somebody every 4 weeks that the victim starts to, I don't know if rely on you is the right word, but
Like
if you've done their hair once, go ahead.
Would it be like building confidence in you? Because I mean, like, when we see it with chimpanzees, right? As a crude example, where like that it's affection through physical touch and grooming someone. So I mean, I presume they build some confidence in you and trust in terms of, well, if you're gonna look after my hair, you can look after my secrets, right?
Exactly. And it's so funny you said that, because I've often wondered if part of that psychology is building trust in physical touch. Like, I've never injured anyone in my hair chair, right? And if you have to see me once a month for 7, 15, 20 years, because I'm 24 years into this, eventually you're gonna start talking. Well, some, I shouldn't say everyone, but it shocked me how many people I've known throughout my career at like the 10-year mark or the 5-year mark or the 2-year mark. How should I word this? I don't want to say shocked me, but out of nowhere shared something while they were in my chair about being abused as a child. And right after the words left their mouth, they would say, I can't believe I just told you that. Like, my own family doesn't know that.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah. And so it's interesting because I really think hairdressers should be trained. It should be part of their curriculum to know that this is a piece of your job. You're working with the public. We're one of the few careers where you are literally physically touching the customer, and there's a lot that can come out when you do this job. And it would really help. It would have helped me to have some training on how to respond to that, because my biggest fear the first time somebody disclosed to me that they were abused as a child was that I didn't want to hurt them further. It felt like everything was so fragile. They were completely vulnerable, and I was afraid that I was going to hurt them more by saying or doing the wrong thing.
Hmm.
So for me, I became a ferocious reader. Like I started studying up on the books that therapists use to pass their testing. And I tried to grab any knowledge that I could about what it's like to be in front of a victim or a survivor and ways to respond or make them feel a little more at ease. Because I still don't remember what I looked like the first time somebody told me that they were sexually abused, but hopefully my face didn't appear like I was horrified, because that's the last thing you want to do. So
yeah, no, I understand that. Like, yeah, you don't want to make them feel like crap. When
right.
you've accidentally slipped the tongue of one of the worst things that could have ever happened to them, and has happened to them. Yeah. No, it's nuts because you don't think about it. Like, I remember in my college, you see the hairdressers, and I spoke to them, and because I used to work in the kitchen in cooking, and the hairdresser was just next to it, so you'd walk out for your cigarette, and we just get chatting sometimes, and they never mention anything about like talking skills, soft skills, like just basic talking to people. Those are really instrumental. They should teach those in schools. If there's any teachers that say this, advocate for teaching soft skills in schools. They're really valuable. But there's never anything about that. But you're right. Like, it's such an intimate thing, especially today where there's a lot of people that are quite anxious about, never mind holding someone's hand in public, on a first date, but going to see someone in person on a date is not exactly normal anymore, which is sad, for many reasons.
And we could go on and on about dating culture.
God,
or hookup culture.
Yeah, that's basically it. But yeah, there's nothing in there about like psychology, and it's probably one of the most vulnerable spaces that a person could be in these days in the West, anyway. Okay, so when did you go to MBTTT from there?
So after I studied up on psychology and understanding survivors and victims, I had a strong interest in doing more work in that type of landscape because it opened my eyes to how common this problem is in society, and just in my own small experience of doing hair and realizing how common it was just in my own clientele. The one thing I became really passionate about was stopping this problem early, because I'm listening to the people that are adults who never had a chance or opportunity to speak out when they're a child. And I got really fed up with hearing the same story over and over again like a broken record. I wasn't fed up with the survivor. I was fed up that there was nothing or no type of outlet for children to release some of this stuff. And I thought, why the heck aren't we talking about this stuff? This should be in schools, it should be online, there needs to be more messaging, more awareness, more prevention. Well, lo and behold, it turns out there's a brilliant woman by the name of Erin Marin, and she was way ahead of me. She passed a law to get into the schools where she does exactly that. She has a program where they go into the schools once a year and they teach this. And I thought, oh my gosh, that's fantastic. And it's an excellent, excellent start. But I definitely see the need to add on to the work she's already doing and make it even bigger, because there are tons of kids who might not attend school, or the day that this program is being offered, the parents, I hate to say it, but they conveniently, their child is absent that day, or they're allowed to, they have to give consent. So to me, it's a red flag if a parent signs off and says, I do not want my child sitting through this class. I really have to wonder what that's about.
It's a bit of a red flag. Yeah. I mean, why wouldn't you like want your kid to understand?
I could understand if it's a child that they know is a victim and that child is receiving help perhaps that's a triggering circumstance. So that's fair. But you do have to wonder what is going on there. And maybe it's a little bit of fear from the parent. Like they're thinking, well, what exactly are you going to say to my child if they're not familiar with the law or the program? So, or who's teaching the class? I could understand that.
Yeah, and I mean, there's a thing. I mean, one thing that we're looking at with Tell Sid is like engaging all of the stakeholders in the game. So, for instance, like, so instead of just going to like a charity and going, oh, here's what you can do here, and then leaving it be, or just going to a school and going, oh, here's what you can do there, and just leave it be. It's like we're like, right, okay, get the kids in, get the teachers in, get the parents in, get the charities in, get everyone in the same room, and then everyone sings from the same hymn sheet. You can air your grievances, get a bit of beef out there. Sure thing, why not? Because at the end of the day, it's not about anyone else in the room unless you're under the age of 16 or 18.
Right.
So it's about the kids. So if at least everyone can get in the same room and have the discussion and understand what they've all said together in one community, and I bet you there'll be a lot of people in the room that have never even heard or seen the people around them because they just don't engage enough. There's lots of reasons. There's working 2 jobs or 3 jobs and raising kids. It's crazy.
Yeah.
But that's the way to do it, is to get everyone involved. And I know time's tight, but this is kids, and it's the biggest priority. I was just looking there because you said about kids not going to school, and yeah, it's in 2022. So, well, obviously 2 years ago. We have, in England alone, we have 140,000 kids that are persistently not going to school. They're classed as missing kids. 140,000 of them, which is insane.
What do you think is going on?
Well, this all started off from COVID. There's a lot of kids doing school from home, and then there was like, right, everyone's going back to school, and there's a lot of kind of fear and stuff. But I mean, trafficking's massive. We talk about the history of slavery and stuff. We've got 64 million slaves, as I last checked, in the world right now, which is there's never. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comment section, which I might not read, but there was never been that many in the world in slavery, and it's a lot of it's children, a lot of it's women, trafficking for sex, trafficking for drugs, trafficking for slavery, and it's massive. It's a massive trade because people are worth a lot of money, and I think organized crime has become so complex and so advanced, especially with the advent of technology and government not keeping up, whether it's a lack of funding or a lack of understanding. And these guys are just way too smart. And if you can take a little genius who has no sense of morality, or they're doing it for a reason, for helping a family member, I don't know, I don't care, I just don't care, then they could be 10 times ahead of government. They could be leveraging VPNs and using AI tech to calculate spreadsheets of how many kids can I shove into a Baltic state, or they've got to go to the Middle East this week to start picking poppies because they grow a load of opium out there. So I think technology is aiding these guys a lot, and I think the lack of keeping up to date and understanding and deploying tech at scale and enabling people with decent pay to be able to practice this has exacerbated this problem massively. And the exposure for kids online, they're online all the time and they want approval, they want attention, because every kid does. And if they can't find it at home, they'll find it through the phone. Oh, that rhymes. Keep that one. Use that one.
Yeah, I like that.
But they will. And it breaks my heart. But the gangs are exploiting this, and I think that's a big reason why 100,000 children.
And it's
a few years ago.
Yeah, humans have become the new drug, right? And the drug dealer is making a lot more money off of the humans than they ever were making off of the drugs. And the problem is with that is that they are now coaching the children how to draw in more children. So it's, back in the day, it was like you sent the child to school with your drug product, maybe it was cocaine, and said, sell this to all your friends. Well, now you're sending the trafficked child to school and saying, exploit all of your friends. Get your peers to be wearing these half tops in front of the camera, or see if you can have a sleepover where we can turn on the webcam, all of these things. And it's sad because the child that's happening to is just trying to survive. And they know that they are under the thumb of this disgrace of a human being, and that their job is to draw in as many friends as they can. Well, I mean, how confusing is that to the next child? I mean, I've caught my own children just on roadblocks having conversations with a friend of a friend, and I can hear the other child's voice. This just happened recently. And I said to my daughter, I said, honey, who are you playing with? And she said, oh, Sophie's friend. And I said, we don't know Sophie's friend. And you could hear that it was a child. And she said, but it's a kid. I said, doesn't matter. If it's someone you met online, the answer is always no.
Nope.
But then we look at that on the playground or at school. I mean, it explodes into the world of trafficking. And if it's online, it's probably a lie. That's what I've gotten used to saying as a mom.
Online.
Yeah, I like the word lie is inside online.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Good.
If you haven't met them in person, no.
It's true. It's true. I mean, when I was little, I was on Omegle and chat roulette and stuff. Oh, Jesus Christ! Why did I go on there? And it was so you've heard of Kik, the social media app,
yes.
full of a lot of kind of bad stuff, right? Mm-hmm. It's crazy how they're not in the news. It's weird. So I know, right? It's weird. Backroom deals. Yeah. So when I was a kid, I'd go on there and you'd meet someone, and I just spent a lot of time in a room, meeting strangers online. It was really healthy. And I would always be like, you got to turn your webcam, otherwise I'm going to skip because I don't know who you are. And I'd turn the webcam and be like, great, yeah, okay. And then I'd be like, oh, well, someone my age,
Yeah.
So I'll just get the details, and they'd be like, oh, have you got Kik? And I was like, what the hell is Kik? And they're like, oh, Kik, we use it for, meeting people on this. And I was like, okay. And then the years went on, I was like, oh, the groomers use Kik to get the kids into an app first. It's like, all right. So then I was on an app because at the time I was a kid, so the kids got me into the app that the groomers use to get the kids into the app, to get other kids in the app. And I was like, oh crap, that's really bad. It was just absolutely insane. I hate it so much. I hate it.
And that's how it works. And I mean, getting back to like what we were chatting about earlier with sexual abuse prevention getting into the schools, it's amazing to me how many parents are concerned about it, but then their child has a phone or a tablet. And I'm like, listen, before the internet, I could see where you had pause and thought, I don't know that I want somebody talking to my kid about this. But guess what? The predators are already talking to your kids about this. We're actually light years behind them, and we need to catch up. So for the people that are like, I think that might be too much for my child, my question is always, well, do they have a tablet? Do they have any electronic devices at home? Because you're already behind if you haven't had this conversation. I guarantee you that every kid who has an electronic device has stumbled across something at least once. That's not realizing whether it's a predator or it's pornographic or just something completely vulgar that would never be a child for appropriate rather for a child. So it's like you're
Peppa Pig.
Yeah, I'm like, you're afraid of prevention messages, but you're okay with a device that offers porn? Like, what's happening here?
Yeah, no. It's just no better way of putting it, to be honest. And unfettered access to strangers online that can talk to a child within a split seconds is also something to be aware of. For sure. No, it's... I can only say crazy so many times, and then I just kind of lose it a little bit inside.
I know.
Yeah, so, I mean... With the other methods that we found in the UK, so this is going back maybe a year, and this is kind of repulsive. So if you want to skip the next minute, I get it. But it's good to also be aware. So we had, when I was talking with the police in Avon and Somerset quite some time ago. It's down the southwest of England. Beautiful place if anyone's looking for a tourist hotspot. They were telling me about the methods in which, like, the British Transport Police have found traffickers to be using children. So, for instance, they'd target children typically from middle to poor backgrounds, give them like the latest phone. Like I'm talking like a really snazzy iPhone. I can't afford a snazzy iPhone. The kid's got a snazzy iPhone. And then they'd be like, oh, here's a gift for you. And the kid would be really grateful and be like, oh my God, I can show this off to my friends, because as you just mentioned, well, part of the culture is around kids having the latest and the best device, because it's your bling, isn't it? It's, I don't even want to use that word anymore. I don't know. And the kid would be sucked in. They'd be like, oh crap, I've got an iPhone. This guy's looking after me. He can help me and my family. My single mum at home who's raising me and my brothers and sisters. We're struggling. And then they're like, right, but you owe me for that now. So what they did was they started teaching girls in particular, when they were trafficking them for sex and drugs, on the trains. So they teach them, okay, if you're sitting by yourself on a train and you see a British Transport police officer walking down the carriage, go sit next to a stranger and say, oh, is it okay to sit next to you? My parents just at the next stop. So then the transport officer would think, oh, well, that child's with that adult, so they're safe. There's not a kid randomly by themselves. So then the kid can escape through without being detected for their own safeguarding, which was just like, wow, okay. And kids are sneaky. I was a sneaky kid. It's easy to teach a kid how to be sneaky. Especially when they think they're helping their mum and they think their mum doesn't realize that she needs the help. And there was more graphic stuff. There's way more graphic stuff in terms of them putting drugs inside of these young girls, which is just absolutely disgusting. And I would love to hurt these people. So they use all these kind of disgusting sick tactics that someone with a moral compass would not even imagine that they would do, but they do. So it's good to be aware of it, and to think, if you think that something's completely inconceivable in this world, oh, it is. It's very conceivable. Whatever you think has happened has most likely occurred many, many times to many children and vulnerable adults as well. So it's kind of just take your head out of the sand a little bit.
And I think when we explain it in a way that helps people understand drugs have always been a problem and children are the new drug, they stop looking at it like it's, just a problem in other countries or at the border. No, it's everywhere. It's in your neighborhood. It's in your church. It's wherever someone is trying to hit a vulnerable target to make money. And that's always going to be where the children are.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. No, 100%. Like, and you get these CEOs of these companies like Meta and stuff, like Mark Zuckerberg didn't let his kid use an iPad or an iPhone or anything like that, because he knows, like, it's a multi-billion-dollar piece of technology that is being designed to draw your attention as much as possible. And he knows all the risks that are associated with it. And I personally, having worked in tech for 5-6 years, and in this industry in particular, in child safeguarding and stuff, I wouldn't let my children near a smartphone or a smart device until they're at least 13, because I know the social aspect of kicks in. I hope that they ban phones in schools effectively by that point, like smartphones anyway. Because I prefer my kid didn't have this stuff. And then, yes, because the brain is still developing for males. I don't know about females. I'm not sure if it's earlier or later by 2 or 3 years. Like the gray matter in the brain is still evolving for I know for males up to 25.
Yeah.
So there's still plenty of time when they hit 16 to train them in how smart devices work. And they're going to have AI assistants. So they're going to be way ahead of where I was when I was their age, which is great because I want to see the kids that I haven't had yet grow up to be way more successful than I will be. And way more healthier. My God, way more healthier than I've been. So I'd rather that they didn't have it. So yeah, and that's coming from a guy who's been in this for like 5-6 years and has absolutely nothing to gain by making that statement. They just shouldn't have it.
Yeah. And we have, and I'm sure you have something similar in the UK. We have a Bark phone. I'm sure you're familiar with Bark.
I've heard of those guys, yeah.
Yeah. They're great. They created a phone for children that's essentially, it's not a smartphone. So you could give this to, say, your 13-year-old, and it's not going to have Snapchat or all of the apps most parents would be concerned about. But it looks like a smartphone, so they fit in with their peers, right? But it only allows for text messaging, I think taking photos and phone calls, which it's sort of like the training wheels for a bike, right? Like you have to learn how to work
Stabilizers
with the training wheels on before we can take that off and just let you ride free. So I think it's a brilliant way to raise a child with technology before you jump all in and hand them, you know, the internet and everything that comes with it. So
there's one in New York, well, they're based in New York. I know the founder is called Eli, and he's a fantastic dude. And they take like Google phones and Android phones, and then they just manually reprogram them so you can't download apps or like, you know, any kind of third party software. You can only use the store they build, and they approve every app that comes through. And these guys aren't sponsored, by the way. These are just good people that we know and good companies that we know. But yeah, they're really good people. And there was one story though, however, where he had a young lady come in with the parents, and they were like, okay, we want to get her a safe phone because her normal phone's a little bit, you know, dangerous. I think she was 12 or 13, something like that. And they were like, okay, yeah, fair enough. So they got her the smartphone, took it home. A week later, the family came back in, and it was too late. Like the kid is already being so used to the apps and everything, the stimulation, the dopamine hits, the behaviors that come with it, and the culture around those applications, that she was just like, it was like, I'm not going to put words in the guy's mouth, and I'm paraphrasing now, so he's off the hook. But it was like kind of like the kid was just like demanding the smart device back. It was too late. You know, you gave the kid crack, the kid wants crack. And it's literally that simple. Because these things are like gambling machines, like they're designed to suck you in. But I feel like I'm talking way too much now, so I'm going to shut up for a little bit.
No, you're not. No, it's actually, as you were talking, I was actively listening, but I jotted something down that you touched on, and I was like, oh, we should chat about this.
Go for it. Lead the way.
I love that your friend Eli is doing that. The concerns, and I know I'm not the only parent like this, is even if we were to purchase these safe phones, if you will, for children that don't have the internet, you still have to consider what their peers are allowed to have, because my children might have the safe phone, but if they go to their friend's house up the street and they have free reign of a smartphone, well, now my child is being exposed to what that child is allowed to have. So, and we've had this issue just with my 13-year-old. He's not allowed to have Snapchat, but his friends have come to the house before, and they're great kids, don't get me wrong, but they'll be Snapchatting with my son or my house in the background, and I'm like, whoa, hold on. You know, these are conversations I never thought I would have to have. But now we're living in a society where this is common practice. So that's why I'm a huge advocate for training the child, because it's just not possible to reach every household and every parent. So
I dread to think what it's going to be like when I'm in like 10, 15 years time. Well, I'm, hopefully it's not that late. Crap, Adam. When it's a bit later in my life, like I'm having my children, and then I'm sitting down to talk with them about this sort of stuff. What's that conversation going to look like? Because it's all moving so quick. I mean, we had it, what was it, 3 years ago? There was no ChatGPT, and now we've got ChatGPT, and we've got way more advanced models now, and they do video generation, and they produce deepfakes that look like me, that can literally take like probably half of this podcast to practice on and get it pretty well. You know.
But have you noticed, Adam? I maybe this is just me, but I try to avoid ChatGPT, and I really don't like, even just on LinkedIn, you can click to have a premium package where you run all of your comments or content through AI. I feel like that steals from our authenticity. When I read through people's things, I'm noticing patterns. We're all starting to sound identical. We're using the same vocabulary words. it's too structured and robotic to me. I personally would rather see a few grammatical errors or somebody speak from their mind or their heart without this strange box where everyone sounds like a Harvard PhD, which is great in some circumstances, but I just want to talk to real people. And if we're all trying to be this chat GBT or this AI, imagine what it's like for our kids who I know for a fact have used it to cheat on exams and, you know, all this stuff. Like, why would you do your own work anymore? And the adults are guilty of it too.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I'm sorry for anyone that can hear that. I think there might be a dog barking outside.
Is that Sid?
Oh, it's not Sid. No, Sid's way cooler than that dog. Oh, it's because there's a cat there. I might have to try and edit this out. I hope I can edit this out, because if I can't, then, well,
that's so fair.
Sorry, guys. You get a nature show.
He's allowed to bark it out.
Yeah, well, it's all about the animals. Oh, there's 2 cats. Thanks, guys. Perfect time.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, yeah, no, but it's very inauthentic. So I get it suggested to me on LinkedIn when I connect with someone new, like, and I hate it. Yeah. I go, hey man, just as a kind of offset to go, exactly. I'm not using AI. I'm going to be very professional with you, because I am anyway. But you know,
I love it.
It's tedious as well. Like if I can pick up on language, and I spend a lot of time studying language because I'm fascinated by it. And, and I can see it. It's so obvious when someone's leveraged like GPT, unless they're really good with the directives. Then I'm like, yeah, no, don't even talk to me. Because if you're not willing to tap your screen a few times and think for 10 seconds, then you're really not worth my time. So
yeah, exactly.
It's simple as that. It's kind of like those bots that auto add everyone on LinkedIn to try and get business. It's like, yeah, go away. Don't want to talk to you.
Yeah.
Really annoying.
Yeah, I think you know when you're talking to a robot.
Yeah, I mean, was it Michael Scott in the US office that turned around and said that people will never go out of business? And he's completely right. Like that character, I don't know if you must have seen it. You would have definitely seen it, surely. The US office.
What is it? Say that again.
The US office?
Yeah, what you said something before that, but you cut out.
Oh, you've seen it, right? The US office.
Yes.
Oh, cool. Okay, that's fine. But yeah, he's a weird character and he's a complete idiot, but he was right. People will never go out of business. I'd rather deal with a person like this conversation than with an AI. So, yeah.
Exactly. So, I don't know. And I feel like, honestly, all of this sort of segues into dating culture, like you and I have talked about before, where people are afraid to talk to each other face to face because they're not matching up to their chat GBT and their filtered photos, and like we're just robbing people of being real.
They're not taking risks anymore. Okay, so yeah, we spoke about this on the phone, and I'm happy to talk about this again. You know, like I've got it where I've experienced it in the past. I'd be lying if I said I didn't, because I've grown up in this technological age, and it impacts basically every single young man, which is why we're seeing so many unemployed, unambitious young men who are afraid of taking risks and not doing anything about it, because they're just being completely diluted into this online world full of rubbish, you know, like going for Instagram. I know it's not just my algorithm, because I've seen my mates, and it's full of crap. It's just crap. It's brain rot. But also things like pornography, taboo topic, but basically everyone in the world watches it, so we all know the drum up sound when Pornhub goes doom, 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 you know, everyone knows the sound. And that's literally just stealing like so much energy and ambition from young men in particular, because they watch it more. But from the younger generation in general. I mean, we saw a study came out during COVID in the UK where they found there was more 20 to 25-year-old pedophiles in both genders equally, men and women, than there's ever been before. And they found it through desensitization to repeated use of content. So, you know, 12-year-old kid hears, oh, it's good to explore pornography when they're like just hitting puberty, which is no, because it's not real and it's really bad for you. and then they go and explore that. Then they get hooked on it because they can just tap the screen whenever they like, and there's no risk to be taken in watching it because you don't have to speak to anyone, you don't have to love anyone, care for a partner, you don't have to. I mean, it's not as if you have to in the first place. It's whether you want to and whether you feel it. But it's there's no risk to be taken. There's no effort to be put in. They can just do it. So I've got a real problem with the porn industry and what they've done, and it's getting worse. And you're seeing now where you've got, again, young lads in particular, where they're just expecting it, and there's this community came out of it of like called incels, where it's a mix. It is a mix of different types of men, where some of them are just completely bullied and marginalized. They've got no one to talk to, and they don't have any confidence or self-esteem. They don't know how to talk to women, and that's help those people. But there are some who are quite extreme who think it's their right to be sleeping with a particular woman, which is just, wow, mate, you've got an ego. It's all drawn back to this rise in unfettered access to overstimulating content that is just addictive, that you can just press a button like a rat, just hit a dopamine button and it'll hit it till it's dead, because that's what they do, and it's the same stuff. What's your take on it? I mean, and
then I could go on and on. I mean, you just touched on a lot of things. For starters, if you're in the dating world and you're addicted to porn, I mean, how willing are you to go out and meet someone in person when you could just satisfy your needs online, right?
Yeah.
Because you're thinking, well, I mean, if it doesn't work out with this girl or this guy, like, I could just click this button and see whatever I want.
Yep.
Or take it a step further, and let's say, you're a teenager and you're addicted to porn, and you go out with this girl or this guy, and your impression of sex is to strangle your partner, your first experience out of the gate. Imagine the magnitude of destruction that could do to the other child. I mean, it's just disgusting to think that this is what children are viewing as a normal part of sex, when it is the furthest from the truth. And then couple that with the fake images. Children are watching these images online of people that are completely filtered or have had tons of plastic surgery, not to mention, is the actor or actress under the influence? Is the actor or actress being trafficked? Is the actor or actress a victim of sexual abuse and they were groomed as a young child and they're now being degraded on camera? Like, the entire porn industry has actually become the sexual abuse industry. It's no longer porn, it's abuse.
Yeah.
And people are buying in. And even when I meet people who, they're good human beings and we have these conversations and they're like, well, Colleen, I'm not subscribing to any of that stuff. I just watch normal porn. And I'm like, the second you click on online porn, you are contributing to a child being abused. There's no way around it, because what they're not telling you is that everything that plays into it, all of the algorithms and the marketing, all of these things, even if you're clicking on, say, we'll just say heterosexual consensual porn, there is still so much that you're raising up on the back end of the dark web. Like, it's all tied together. So what's the solution? I think it's teach kids that porn is the new drug, because I'm in my 40s and I meet men who are like, man, back in my day, all we had was, a bunch of Playboy magazines that we found in my dad's basement. And I'm like, and guess what? Kids weren't getting sexually abused while you were flipping through that magazine.
But used to be on the top shelf.
So now it's an online platform where young lives are being destroyed because of the evil that's behind it. And you can justify it all day long if you want to, but it's just pure evil, and it's all connected, unfortunately. I wish in a perfect world we could separate the adult industry from the abuse industry, but it's too far gone, and there's just no way to do it.
And on that, and it's just made me think of a deviation into another subject, which is very, very much trending in a minute. But to finish on that point, like,
Yeah.
it's the acceptance of positioning the product of porn has changed massively. It's a contrast, which you'd never think would change, but oh my god, that dog is in my garden. Get out of my garden, midget. It's tiny. Oh, the other one's trying to get through, but he's way too big. Get through there, midget. So I mean, again, we used to put it on the top shelf. When I was a little kid, I'd be standing on my tiptoes like, what's that? Oh, filthy little kid. But you couldn't see because your parents were like, no. And everyone in society said, no, a child should not be seeing naked men and women, period. End of story.
Yeah.
Whereas now, it's softcore porn. All over your phone, as soon as you sign up to Instagram, you get it pushed in your face within one of those tiles in the Explore feed.
Oh.
Straight away. And it's just like, okay, so the kid never needs to stand on his tiptoes anymore because he can just pull out his phone and go on the App Store and download an app that everyone signs up to. And all you have to do is hit, I accept the terms of service, and yes, I am over the age of 13. It's like, we have so many ways to verify someone's age. And that's the option they choose.
Yeah. And we're not even talking about the escalation factor that comes with having a porn addiction. I mean, how many young children are getting addicted at, say, 8 or 9 years old, and then by the time they're 15, the porn that they were introduced to is no longer creating the high that they need, right? Yep. Because it's like no one starts out with heroin and meth. It starts with marijuana, right?
Tobacco,
or tobacco or whatever. So when you have someone that's exposed that early on, who's constantly seeking out that high, is it any wonder that we have more and more predators being created at a younger age? Yep. Because eventually things that used to disgust you are now one of the only things that turn you on. And that's a major problem. So that's why porn is actually creating more predators, without a doubt.
Goes back to that study,
Yeah, and I mean, there's been men who were, do you know what anime is, Adam? I'm sure you do.
Are you on about like hentai, where it's like animated porn?
No, anime is the characters where they look like the face of, say, a 12-year-old, but the body of a 25-year-old. It's like a comic.
Yeah, you know in the porn industry that exists, but it's referred to as hentai. Yeah.
Oh, my bad.
Yeah. No. Honestly, it's better not to know. It's not better not to know. It's bad not to know, but you prefer not to know.
Right, exactly. So, with the creation of anime, they are now starting to see this group of individuals, predominantly males, who never had any pedophile tendencies, are now clicking on CSAM, child sexual abuse material, formerly known as child pornography, but we've learned not to call it that because the word pornography implies consent, which is something a child can never do.
It's just material.
So, CSAM. So now you've got these men who never thought about children in a sexual way, are conditioned to looking at things like anime, where it's the face of a child, but the body of an adult. And what do you think they're starting to be attracted to? Children.
God, I hate this one.
It's disgusting. And so the porn industry loves it because
they get sales for life, right?
They get sales for life, and the children are worth more in the porn industry than an adult would be, which is horrifying.
Because it's like gambling, where it's not the 80% you focus on for continuing revenue. It's the addicted 10% that will keep shoving the money back in.
Yes. Yeah. And the piece that's highly addictive is the fact that it is a taboo topic, right? It's the thrill of getting caught. It's the thrill of doing something that isn't accepted in society, and so on and so forth, which is why I am a huge advocate for training the children to be fully aware of this and let them know that there are predators everywhere in the world and pedophiles, and we have to be aware of them, and this is how it works, and so on and so forth. But it's a shame because it was always a problem, and now it's so amplified with the addition of the internet and the porn industry. It's out of control.
Yeah, it is. And, you know, we're not hearing politicians talk about it enough. I mean, in the UK over here, we've got a new government in. Keir Starmer is our new prime minister. He's an interesting one. I've got so many things to say. But in ignoring his many achievements, shall we say, you know, not once in the King's Speech, because over in the UK we have the King's Speech, which basically cements out what the new government's going to do, you know, over the next Parliament, because they represent him and they do his work essentially on paper, and not once was CSAM and basically the pandemic. You know, it's overused word, but it is true in this case, because it's global. Not once was it mentioned, you know, about the kids, the 140,000 missing. Not once was it mentioned about child exploitation becoming massive and it being leveraged and abused by companies that are making a fortune out of this, including
and while we're on
NGOs.
that, yeah. And while you're on that topic, I'm sure they also didn't mention how much a transgender child is worth to a trafficker or the porn industry. Yeah, because if you think regular children are a taboo topic, transgender children in the porn industry and to a trafficker are the holy grail. They can make so much money because those children are valued as, what's the word I'm looking for? Specialty, if you will, to the sick mind of these individuals. So they can receive a lot more money for a kid who is transgender. And it is utterly disgusting and no one wants to talk about it, but all children are at great risk. But a transgender child raises higher on the platform because they are considered specialty. And these predators and traffickers are willing to pay a lot more. And that's disgusting. But nobody wants to talk about those things. And we pretend like, oh, maybe if we keep exploiting these transgender kids, it will help them feel supported. I personally don't see it that way. It terrifies me to see a transgender child get exploited because I feel like we are walking them into the lion's den. I think that their support needs to come from other sources. Like, we can't just keep throwing these children in front of the spotlight without considering what that looks like from the disgusting dark web perspective. Like, we have to do a better job of protecting them. That's just my opinion.
So when you say like from other sources of like support, so what do you mean by? Is it like online forums where these kids try and find these places where like they? It's like, for instance, I take an example of a child in a very like anti, I don't know all the letters, LGBTQ household, and you know it's a persistent case. They've got gender dysmorphia or dysphoria, my bad, on the name of it. And they're reaching out online to try and find someone who's got a similar experience, because they feel isolated and alone, and they're worried about their health. And they reach out to someone online. Is that kind of support you mean? Because they're more susceptible to harm, right? By going these forums and reaching out to people that are predators that just sitting there. But is that the kind of support you meant, or is it another vice sort of thing?
No, I'm sorry. Say that again. I meant support as in the US, and I can't speak for what it's like in the UK. The focus for transgender children is more about getting them their own bathroom, giving them hormone replacements and puberty blockers, making sure that they are receiving extra support inside the school system, and that they're active members of the LGBTQ, and that they're given priority for just about anything that surrounds their education, whether that be social work or specialty groups inside the school. And now that all sounds great, right? Like, oh yeah, the child is struggling, they have gender dysphoria, whatever that may be. I'm not arguing any of that. My concern is that you are, in a sense, exploiting transgender children by doing that. And guess who's excited about that? The traffickers and the pedophiles. So, like, this is just me talking. If I had a child that was transgender, personally, the last thing I would do is put that on the internet. I'm never going to be like, yay, I'm a proud mom of this LGBTQ child. Like, nope. Because
is it about you, or is it about the child when you make that post?
Exactly. And I know exactly how these pedophiles and these traffickers view children in general, and then to hand them the holy grail, which is a transgender child. I'm not doing that. I'm not going to draw attention to it. I'm not going to expose it. Like, privacy is protection. So when I meet parents who are loud and proud about their transgender child, I think to myself, well, that's great that you're a loving, supporting mom or dad, but what are you doing to protect that kid? And why are you throwing that all over the internet?
I really like that privacy is protection piece. That's really good.
It's just
again,
the less people know about you, the more protected you and your family are.
No, it's true. And, I've got some standing on this one. So in the UK, you mentioned puberty blockers.
I know.
I'm okay with flack. They're essentially like
we're
forced
both
sterilizing
okay with
children.
flack, Adam.
No, it's cool. It's cool. Bite me.
Yeah.
Come on. So no, they're basically like forced sterilizing children, which is just absolutely disgusting. I can understand there's mental health components to it. Fair enough.
Sure.
Get a licensed therapist, psychologist. Have that discussion. When I was in my 20s, in my early 20s, I went through a period where I thought I might be trans. So right, I thought I went through the whole thing. I did my reading online. I did my research. I went to the National Health Service. Over here, we banned puberty blockers or sterilization pills for kids. We banned that because we saw it as very unethical, and our government's done the right thing there, in my opinion, and that's fine. Someone else can have a different opinion. I'll disagree with you. But yeah, I went through that period, and I spoke to my dad about it, and I spoke to my mum about it, and they were really supportive. They were kind of neutral supportive, which is, again, fine, because they can have their own opinion, and that's absolutely fine with me. I wasn't going to them hoping to be accepted and them to kind of give me a cuddle about it and be like, oh yeah, crack on, son or daughter, whichever. It was more about me trying to figure out things, and I just wanted to speak to them to get their opinion, because that's all they've got. They're doing their best. They've got their opinion. And what I said to them was, I said, I tell you what I'm not going to do. I'm not going to go to the doctor, because once you do this, once you start the process, there's no going back. Now, it turned out it wasn't the case. It turned out that I'm pretty comfortable in my own skin. Now, if I did do that, there's a good, strong possibility that I'd never be able to have children. Now, I really, really hope to have kids one day, because it's the way I see it is, it's what you're destined to do. You're destined to have kids, and you pass on your line and your love and what you've learned in life, whether it's smart or stupid, and you do your best, and they crack on and carry the torch. But beyond that, if I did go down that line and I did receive quote unquote treatment, it would have been taken away, and also I would have hated myself. I would have looked in the mirror and hated myself. So I'm really glad I didn't. But there are cases I know of over here as well, where, because I've spoken to other charities about this, and they're really concerned, is that there are these individuals, these organizations that are actively seeking out these children and trying to coerce them into these spaces where there was a recording of one lady, this was in the United States, where she was in a different state, and someone pretended to be a little girl, and they called this organization, and they were saying, I'm struggling with gender dysmorphia. I think I'm a man trapped in a girl's body. And this girl, she said, my age is 9 on the phone. It's a really high pitched voice. And there's another lady speaking, and she was talking, like she said, like, what do your parents think? She said, my parents are really like Trump supporters. They're really against it. She's like, okay. And by the end of the conversation, it was along the lines, well, she said, we can look at trying to get you funding to get you out here, like to their state where it's allowed, I'm guessing, in there. But then it was to say, but we can send you a chest clamp. And I was just like, so you're going to send a child who's under the age of consent, whose parents are against it, who has not received any, as far as I'm aware from that conversation, any professional medical advice on the subject, to then start mutilating their own body through a chest clamp.
Yeah.
Which I just think, what's wrong with you?
Yeah.
You sick person. And I just, it's fine. Someone needs to say it. It's sick.
Yeah.
Like, how can you do that to a kid? I would love to hit you. Really love to hit you. It's just disgusting.
Adam, hold on 1 second. My dog wants to go outside.
That's cool. I'm going to nip to the loo. It's all good.
Perfect.
I need to breathe. Sorry,
I was chewing. You'll hear my dog scratching to come back in at some point, so we'll just pause.
It's all good. Yeah, I don't mind. It's like, crack on. Did you want to wait till the dog comes back in, or have a little break, or are you right?
It could be a few minutes.
I don't mind.
She's just sitting out there.
Yeah, I don't mind.
Yeah, we'll just cut out the section where we disappeared. I wrote down the timing, so it should be easy to edit.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
How are you feeling this time around? Are you feeling more confident?
Well, I love the energy of this conversation because
good energy. Yeah. It is good.
So yeah, let's jump back into it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Really easy.
So you were talking before the break about how this child was being sent this device.
Yeah. Chest clamp to squash the developing breasts of the child to appear more like a boy, which is absolutely insane, especially when it's a natural process.
And while we're on that subject, I'm glad you brought that up because I think some of the issues surrounding transgender in general are completely misunderstood.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to pretend that I'm a subject matter expert because I'm not, but when I was talking earlier about how I worked in the beauty industry, I will share with you my small experience. Before transgender or drag queens or any of these topics were a trend, if you will, I used to do hair and makeup for a company that their, what's the word I'm looking for? Celebrity that endorsed their work. It was like a beauty icon, if you will, was RuPaul. Do you know who RuPaul is?
Yes. Yeah, yes.
Okay. Yeah, exactly. Famous drag queen,
super
right?
Famous over here
everybody knows who. Yeah. So I used to work for MAC Cosmetics, and they were all about RuPaul, and RuPaul was wearing MAC's makeup and so on and so forth. So this was in my 20s when no one was even talking about transgender. So with that being said, when I would get these contract jobs where I would go out and be able to do hair and or makeup for some of these drag shows. I never thought anything of it. It was just a job, right? Well, as I was getting to know some of these individuals while working on them, it became very obvious to me, and I don't mean this in a critical way, but they would say things to each other while I was doing hair. One of the examples was the one drag queen said to the other drag queen, like, "Oh, girl, you've been wearing dresses since you were 4 years old." And I said, 4 years old? And he was like, "Yeah, my grandmother used to make me wear dresses." And I was thinking about that in my head, and I'm like, well, that doesn't sound healthy. Like, why would your grandmother force you to wear a dress?
I mean, playing
At
devil's
4
advocate a little bit, because there are lots of kids who dress in the other gender, like other sex, don't they? Like there's boys that try and girls' shoes and stuff, and
Yeah.
you know.
But but was that their choice, or was there a guardian or parent saying you're going to wear this dress?
So did they say that they were being forced to?
Yes, and that. Okay. Hold on, I gotta let my dog back.
No, it's cool. You crack on, crack on. You're all good. It's all right. We'll just cut.
Good girl. Okay. Okay, I'm back. Sorry about that.
It's okay. Don't worry. You're good. So we're back again. Yeah, there we go. Yeah. So just playing devil's advocate. Just asking, like, it's just because passing comments and stuff. But yeah, like with little boys, wearing ladies' clothing and vice versa. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's one thing if the child is asking for it on their own, but if they're being forced into the situation, I think that's a totally different circumstance. Yeah. And then you take it a step further, and I've now known personally 4 transgenders, all adults, the youngest being in their mid-30s. And what breaks my heart about their personal stories is that each of them are victims of sexual abuse in their early childhood. And I won't say that that's the case for every survivor of sexual abuse, because we know that's not true. But my question is always, did that play a role in where they're at today? Because I think sometimes we hear all of these transgender stories, and the first thing my mind jumps to is it connected to trauma? Was there something in their childhood that led them in this direction? Because if my theory is right, and that this is connected to trauma, are we just seeing the outside end result, which is transgender? Because if that's true, I don't think we're going about it the right way. I see it as this is a person that genuinely needs support and help in their journey to find out if it is because of trauma that was unresolved. They may have gone a completely different path in their life. But we are not asking any of these questions. I think we're so quick to be like, oh, they're a transgender, or they're a she, they, them. And I'm like, but time out. I want to know, when did that start, and what was going on in your life at the time, and why? Were you truly born this way, or can you connect it to something that was traumatic?
Quick pause. Do I hear a kid in the background?
That's my dog.
Oh, there's a kid.
Millie, come here, Millie.
Oh,
come here.
Go on, get the dog up.
Yes.
Oh, I love it. What's his name?
Millie,
not he, she.
Oh, yeah, Millie. Well, gorgeous. For now.
Oh, no, I'm not engaging that.
I'm just messing with you. You're not putting that in.
Getting baited by my guest. Yeah, no, so so it's interesting, because like I wouldn't say that every kid that's went through like a transition period or anything was sexually abused. Like I wasn't.
No, I
wasn't sexually abused. But then again, like when you said about it becoming a trend, like it is a trend. There is there is a lot of money to be made out of this industry from a medical industry standpoint, because they're for-profit companies. At the end of the day, they're not charities, they're not NGOs, and there is a lot of money to be made in the private sector in the mental health field. We can kind of identify those characters. I think much like the phone, and if there's an area of like neglect in terms of attention, which kids are very needy for that stuff, which is absolutely normal. I think kids can, and it's I think people need to understand as well. It's not offensive to talk about this, because it's a subject like any other. You know, the same way that Neil deGrasse Tyson said that Pluto is a dwarf planet. I don't think it's a dwarf planet. That's not offensive. It's a debate on a subject, and this is a subject in society that's very much in the headlines, and there's a lot of people going through it, so we should discuss it. It's only fair to them to do that. I think there's a lot of kids that will go down the route of saying they're trans in some aspect, of being confused about it simply because it's around them, because they like kids are like sponges, they absorb a lot of this stuff, or they simply feel ignored, neglected, not enough attention, so they then identify in a certain manner that will get them that attention. Like, I was a kid, I know that when I was bullied a lot, I would then seek attention in other ways. So I didn't go down the trans route or anything. I'd be a little horror, or just annoying. But that's what kids do. It's perfectly natural. But then the issue for me is when it comes to going back to it, giving children medication that essentially sterilizes them, pushing parents in a certain road instead of going, well, these are all the roads that could be taken, and these are all the different causalities, these are all the different reasons, and these are all the different avenues that the child could go down. There's a push for one area in particular. I googled how many people regret transitioning their gender on Google, and it came back with 1%. Like, the Google's answer was 1%, and then there was other websites and studies that said 1%. And I thought, well, if that's not the biggest BS I've ever seen.
And who owns Google?
Well, I mean,
right.
Who runs these studies? Who's participating in these studies? And also the amount of stories that are becoming more common. And I think over the next 5 to 10 years, if the delusion isn't already gone, people are going to be so ashamed of themselves, and they should be, at the amount of young people that come out and hate themselves or kill themselves because they've been transitioned when it was never meant to be the case. And it was just simply confusion. I was 20 years old and I thought I might be for over a 2-year period. It was on and off. And it wasn't. It was a form of, I was really depressed. I was in a tough spot in my life. And in those spots, you'll find anything to solve your problem, because you don't want to be in pain. Whether that's suicide, whether that's self-harm, or whether it's thinking that there's something seriously wrong with you and you're in the wrong body.
Yeah.
And that happens. It really does happen. And these guys are just full of so much shit. Stop listening if swearing's not your thing. This is only episode 2. It's crazy. And you've got a lot of organizations like the BBC and stuff that don't talk about what's really going on. They don't present you with data. They present you with a narrative. And they're all guilty of it. I think the only true journalism you're going to get around this is independent journalists. And if you shouldn't be taught by one angle that it's misinformation or it's disinformation. Who qualifies something as that? Look at the data yourself. Otherwise, you haven't really got a valid opinion. Whether you're actually right or wrong, view the data yourself, and you'll find out. And if it seems unbelievable, fine. Look at some more data. Eventually, it will sink in. And it's just going to keep happening until people wake up and smell.
I just think we're not asking the right questions,
No,
especially
too afraid to.
When you're trying to advocate for a child. I mean, you used yourself as a perfect example, but how many of these social workers or doctors or parents are diving in further to ask the kids? Like, you can't just accept that this is how they're going to feel the rest of their life. I think there's so much we need to rule out before that can be determined.
Yeah, and
because I don't like seeing kids get hurt. I know you don't either. So I would of course you want to be supportive, but at the same time, you have to do it from a place that's going to serve them in the long run, not just where they're at today.
Well, also, it's. I think it's seen as taboo because people don't know. They're told they don't know what they're talking about. They're not educated in the field of biology to understand it to a degree, right, of certainty. So
Mm-hmm.
they're then classed as ignorant or politically extreme or far right, that sort of stuff. And there's a lot of gaslighting going on where these organizations and these people that kind of put themselves on a pedestal will just talk to
Mm-hmm.
you like you're dirt or try and socially isolate you because we're social creatures. Shame's like one of the worst
Yeah.
things we can have. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and if you try and embarrass someone and destroy their reputation in front of the tribe, then they're an outcast. They have no voice, and everything they say is invalid. And there's a
Mm-hmm.
lot of that going on. And it's crazy how the people who are most virtuous, who most, are against the harm of others, will take part actively in destroying someone's life in order to
Yeah.
further their own perspective on the world. And it's
Mm-hmm.
the taste of irony of all of the crap is quite a flavor.
But the challenge for me is like what we talked about earlier with transgender children being worth more. And I can't help but wonder if that's playing a role too. Like, are the people who are pushing the children in this direction seeing a dollar sign?
Yeah, I mean, someone will, right? I mean, if you think that
Yeah.
everyone in this industry is an angel, then you're a bit of a schmuck.
Right.
Because
Exactly. Yeah.
not everyone's an angel. There's people out there that I've dealt with who are genuine psychopaths, and
Yes.
you can't
Mm-hmm.
tell because they're so good at it. Like,
Yeah.
there's one who manipulated me for a long time, and not in like a sexual way. It was in a different circumstance.
While you were a child or as an adult?
No, as an adult. And
Okay.
hate the guy, hate him so much.
Okay.
But
Mm-hmm.
now I know what you now when you meet other people who behaved as he did, you can smell it on them from a mile away. You know who you're dealing with before they really get an hour's time with you.
Mm-hmm.
And these guys and women as well, but there is a lot of men. They're bloody dangerous. They're really dangerous. And to say that there's none of them that would be medical professionals or work in charities, I've met some very, very strange people who have worked in, I say, these bigger charities, not so much the smaller ones, but the bigger ones. You'd be crazy to think that they're all lovely people that all want the best for you. It's just not. It's not real. You're living in a fairyland, and you need to kind of wake up, because if the world was so lovely, we wouldn't have war. We wouldn't have starving kids. We wouldn't have all these horrible things that are going on. That's the whole point of this, though, isn't it? It's to give people, like, like just talking to people and having people express their opinions. I don't care so much if it's fact. This is about, and we can fact check everything, and everyone has the ability to do it. But this is about like speaking to just normal people who are parents, who are charity workers, who are whatever, and having their voices heard. Because if we keep stamping out voices, then well, that's how beautiful little autocracies are born, like North Korea, where there's only one narrative, and Kim can speak to dolphins, and you all starve while that guy gets his McDonald's every weekend on a plane. So it's not as if democracy is like this, and freedom isn't this like thing that you get and it's just ever present and it's yours no matter what. You have to fight for it, because the snakes will find their way in, and you've got to cut the heads off and keep them out, because they'll find a way in and they'll just destroy everything. And I in the UK, I think there's other places in the Western world right now. I think we're heading down those roads where we're at a point where something's going to happen. But we'll see.
Yeah.
Is the dog okay? Is she having a good time?
Yeah, my dog. She's not. My dog's not receiving enough attention, so she's making her presence known next to me.
Could be trans now, for all you know. By the way, really? just to prelude on everything. Yeah. If that's the right use of the word. This conversation is not at all intended to make trans people feel like crap. at all.
No,
On the opposite
not at
side,
all.
they're suffering, which is horrible,
Absolutely.
and I hope they don't
Absolutely.
suffer. But
Yeah.
everyone shouldn't suffer as a consequence of diluting the fact that maybe every single diagnosis is correct.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because humans make mistakes and humans have ill intentions, and this tends to happen. So it's not to do that. And there will be comments that make that claim, and there will be reels taken out of this that make that claim, and I don't care. Give me more press.
Yeah, exactly.
Why not?
Well, and to be fair, the trans people that I do know, they are not for puberty blockers or.
Yeah, I've found that. Yeah. There's a lot of people in the LGBT community, and they're like, "Wow, this is not pride.
That's not a
and they're free love and stuff. This is ridiculous."
Yeah. So I don't know. I just think that we're making too many generalizations. Not you and I personally. I just mean society about this whole transgender. And when I hear or see about the transgender kids in school, it's almost like they're just instantly like, oh, it's a transgender child. We're just going to go with that. And I'm like, but hold on. I think this child needs a lot more help and support than what we're just seeing on the surface. And that speaks to even some of the therapy and social workers and organizations. I've worked with some of those therapists who are telling me that their job through the practice they work for is to affirm the transgender patient. So when a patient comes in to receive therapy or social work or any type of, mental health type background, they're being told that they have to affirm the child. And I'm thinking, but that's not how therapy works. Like when you're in therapy and you're working with somebody who's good at their job and qualified, their job is to ask you questions that help you determine the answers. Like they're encouraging you to dig into yourself in a way where they'll be like, Adam, what was it about your childhood that felt the most painful? And then like you have to give that feedback. I'm just giving a generic example.
No, I know.
Their job is not to be like, Adam, the reason you're this way is because of this, this, and this. They're drawing the answers out of you. You have the answers, just like the transgender child does. But I'm not hearing that. I'm hearing that their job is to be like, well, okay, Sally, you're right. And this is because, because you are a transgender child, you're experiencing this, this, and this. And I'm like, time out. That's not therapy.
Wow. Yeah, I've heard about this. Especially in the United States, in Canada. There are parts in Europe that do it as well. I think I think it might have happened here a fair bit as well. I'm not too certain. Yeah, it's that's the thing about mental health practitioners, right? Is that you're not meant to say you have someone who comes in, and I'm not saying people of the LGBTQIA plus way of living is kind of insane here, but when you have a person come in with a claim to their perspective of life and it's invalid because there's something wrong with the mental health and they're a little bit psychotic, as an example, medical practitioners don't really turn around and go, oh, that bat man you said it was on your roof, guess what, he was actually there. I'm going to affirm your perspective, even though it could be incorrect, simply because it's offensive for me not to affirm that. That's insane. And to have that done to children is that's really, really just no. Yeah.
And I think some of the issue too, Adam, is not, I get it, if you're first meeting a child and it's obvious to you that they're trans and they give you their name and whatever that may be, not the best time to jump in and start a, debate about whether or not they're truly a transgender child. I get
Yeah.
that. Of course, you're going to affirm them in the moment with what's going on because you're still building a rapport. But if you really want to truly help any human being, trans or not, you're going to start to challenge them with questions that are going to help them
Figure it out themselves.
understand their own answers to make sure that they're either on the right path or they're not, for themselves, not for you. And you may find, like, heck yeah, this child is truly trans and that's the direction they're going to go. But
Yeah, fair enough.
aren't you better off knowing that you asked all of the right things to help them define that within themselves, rather than just check a box for the practice you work for and say, yep, I affirmed it? Like, well, hold on. What if you're wrong?
Any other industry of the medical
Right?
practice, like surgeons, for cancer treatment, if any of these kind of practices were put in place there, there'd be hell up, because they're so loosey-goosey and they're so
Yes.
blasé. It's just reckless. And I think
Yeah.
on any human being, especially children, where I swear to God, the doctrine around medicine, is around consent. The patient has to consent. If children can't consent legally, then how is it done? Is it through the parents? Is there a culture being generated where the parents are either informed in a certain manner of which they think this is all very much the case and it's a very common thing, and suddenly that's offset the trends of the last few thousand years? And we can look at history books in different societies, because I love history and I love being educated. So, someone can find a history book pertaining to the existence of trans people in mass and suicides from not transitioning in mass throughout different cultures and countries. I would love to hear it. But that doesn't appear to be the case.
Yeah, and I think the other thing we have to consider too is, I like to know where the transgender child, where do the parents stand? Because is the mom or dad radical right? And this could be the child rebelling to be more radical left and liberal. Or are the parents radical left and the child know, well, this is how I get attention from mom and dad because they are huge advocates for this movement? I mean, don't we all, in a sense, like to grow up pleasing our parents? Isn't that humanity that you seek out to make your mom or dad proud? So how much of that is playing a role in this child's life? And I don't know, those are questions only the individual can answer. And I'm not going to pretend that that's every case, because I know that there are some transgender people who didn't have anything about what you and I are discussing that could prove us both wrong. I'm just saying, if you truly want to advocate for a child, you have to go about it the right way, and we have to ask these difficult questions. You can't just ignore that these are variables in their story, because you could mislead them. And then there's always the argument, and I know you've heard this too, well, what if we don't support the child? And what if they become suicidal? Well, do you know how many people are suicidal without these challenges?
I mean, the amount... that argument really kind of annoys me. There's so many young men in particular that kill themselves through depression. It's insane, the amount of them. And my friends have suffered with it. One of my friends called me at 2 a.m. I was up with my missus. We were in bed, just kind of getting ready to go to sleep. And then he calls me, and he's on a bridge. And he's standing there with his hands on the railing. And he's on the phone begging me to talk him out of it. And I'm just like, there's nothing really you can say. So we got him off the bridge. I was on the phone to him, and I was just like, so he's on the bridge. What? Jesus Christ! And she was just there. She was like, oh my God! It's as if a fire alarm went off. She was like, oh my God! And she just stayed silent, and she was just like looking at me as if to say, like, Adam, say the right words, And it's not the first time, and it wasn't the last. and I hated it. And I've been like that for a long time. There's not a lot of people that know. I guess they're going to find out now, especially in my professional circle, especially with my illness over this year, where the only thing that stopped me from taking my own life was, what would it do to my mum? What would it do to my dad? What would it do to my brothers and everyone who loves me and cares about me, whether I feel it or not? It would destroy their lives completely. They'd never think the same again. They'd never live and breathe the same again. They'd get together at Christmas and they'd think, where's Adam? You know? And that's something I couldn't do to them. So I thought, well, I'll stick with it, deal with the pain, and that's it. You know? And it got better. I managed to, I changed up my diet, I exercised, you know. I'm a lot healthier than I was. It's, you know, and drug, and like, you know, like, cannabis had a part to play in that. It's a disservice to anyone listening to this if it's a disservice to anyone listening to this if I didn't tell the truth. You know, cannabis had a part to play where it does mess you up mentally, and it's the stuff is getting stronger and stronger because they're putting more chemicals in it. It's a lot stronger than it was in the 80s. But this stuff, you know, there are a lot of people who take their own lives on every day, unfortunately. There's a lot of them who are men, predominantly, but we're not talking about that. But the excuse of, you know, mutilating children with tablets is, oh, well, they might kill themselves. Well, then why don't we invest a lot of money in mental health practitioners and support, help rebuild the family unit so that there's a parent who loves that child unconditionally present throughout this process, and then we can really verify the case so that we don't send that child down a road that's impossible to come back from. That costs an absolute fortune, especially in the time where I know over here in the United Kingdom and in other countries there's universal healthcare, but there are long waiting lists. And in the United States in particular, private healthcare is making a lot of money out of this. And it's insane not to say so. So there needs to be a lot more due diligence done around this. There needs to be support around the clock for, I'd say, men in particular, since they're the ones that are mainly killing themselves. But I wouldn't say prescribing mental health crises and suicide and self-harm right down to trans people is the only reason to go through an unreversible medical treatment, especially on children that when I was a kid, I didn't like lasagna, but now I love it, is a way to go. It makes no sense. So that's my 2 cents on it. I don't know if you have any other thoughts on that.
No, well, I'm sorry you went through that. I mean, first of all, it's horrible you had firsthand experience, but second of all, I certainly share your position with people who have come to me while going through suicidal ideation and multiple suicide attempts. And some of that I experienced as a child when I really knew nothing about suicide. Which gives me even more thought to what our young kids are dealing with from their own peers. And we could go on and on about, I mean, geez, show me even just a commercial that says, do you know how to respond to someone who is suicidal? Like where is some of this awareness and advocacy work? It doesn't exist that I know of. So yeah, I can definitely relate to what that's like and talk about the feeling of helplessness to be put in that position. And I'm glad that you were there for your friend and you were able to answer the phone.
I was just glad I was up at 2 a.m. You know, that we were going to go to bed sooner, but we thought we'd watch a movie. And if we didn't watch that movie, then he might have just went, because there was traffic coming both ways. And like if he went off, I know the bridge, it's got such a height. You know, he wouldn't have. If he'd survived, he'd be a fraction of himself, and then he'd want to go. You know.
Yeah. It's horrific.
Yeah, it is. It is horrific.
But all of that to say what we were talking about originally for the parents that are concerned and say things like, well, if I don't support my transgender child, it could lead to suicide. And you're right. You're right. It could. But guess what? Their life could lead to suicide even on the opposite side. And I'm just not sure affirming where they're at is going to solve much, especially when you look at the statistics of suicide for post surgery. When you look at the transgender community, and I'll refer to Jordan Peterson does an excellent podcast on that. I'm certainly not an expert on that, but it's pretty eye-opening to understand how much suicide exists even after the complete transition has taken place. That should tell us something. Which is why I'm all for, I think, let's investigate further before we just sign on and say, yeah, they're transgender and let's support this. I'm like, but let's make sure we're supporting the correct thing before we do that.
Yeah, no, and Jordan Peterson's, he's fantastic. I think just about every single person that I've met that didn't like him, but then ended up watching or listening to one of his sessions in full, changed their minds completely, and they were kind of looking for reasons afterwards to not like him because they couldn't justify it, which was interesting. But that's just that's an innate ego that we all have, and we're really bad at changing our minds when we're so ingrained in a perspective, and that's why hard left, hard right is such a thing, right? Yeah, it's horrible. But yeah, no, you're right. Like, and the thing is, we can't. Touching on what you said, we can't switch from one extreme to another. We're really good at being wrong as a species, because we are. But switching from no transitioning for children 15 years ago to every child can be eligible for that treatment, and then some of them take their own lives anyway. I don't know the numbers, I don't know the rates, but it does exist. There's one in particular on X I'm following. She went down the transition of becoming a man, and she was suffering with just mental health problems, and the doctor basically just kind of like pushed her in the end, was just like, well, if you don't say yes now, we can't keep you on the treatment, like the medical program she was on. So she said yes, and it's been like 2 years now, and she hates that she can't breastfeed. She hates that she can't have kids. She hates that she can't just be a woman. And it's nuts. And we see the stuff around, again. So it's in the press. I don't know if you've seen it. So during the Paralympics, there was a trans athlete who, I think was an Italian runner, pre-op. So still had the male genitalia, and the physique and the testosterone that comes with that, was competing in women's running. And I just thought, I mean, did he win? Did he win? Because I bet he won. Did you hear about it over there in the United States?
I try to block a lot of that stuff out. I didn't. I'll be honest. I didn't follow the Olympics. It's unfortunate because it used to be one of the few safe topics you could discuss with anybody, and it was like something joyful and positive. And now it just creates a huge divide, and it's it's toxic, and it leads to like this type of conversation, and then you get people upset about men and women's sports, or they're fighting this ideology from the left, and I'm like, oh man, I just wanted to watch some awesome athletes, but I can't even do that anymore.
Right? I know. And the opening ceremony was very politicized. The Last Supper and the child next to the person with a testicle out was just quite a spectacle. Personally, if that was my kid, there'd be some words said, I think, in the very least. But it's nuts. And to be honest with you, like, I see it a lot on online and stuff where there's a lot of women that they're afraid, and rightly so, because there's a lot of creepy, horrible men out there that take advantage of the strength and size. It's a matter of fact, and will exploit loopholes like this. But I don't mind saying that it can be wrong in some cases to invade women's safe spaces, because there's no blokes saying it, and I'm wondering if that's goes back to that whole like risk factor we discussed at the start, where there's no get up and go, there's no drive, there's no risk taking. It's just like
Yeah.
there's no ambition in these young men to stand up and say the right thing, where the lasses around them are suffering and they're not
Yeah.
saying anything. It's mad.
Mhm.
And they just rather just take it on the chin and go, oh, it is what it is. Well, mate, it doesn't have to be it is what it is, does it? The amount of times I've had a mate turn around to me and go, it is what it is, and I'm just like, I want to slap you, because it doesn't have to be, you idiot.
Exactly.
Just absolutely crazy. But we can move on from this. I don't know how you're doing for time.
Yeah, I did want to ask you more about Sid, because we have chatted in the past and you had mentioned at some point Sid was going to start offering something where if a child tells Sid, it would, if the child asks a question and it's on, say, a piece of history, you would show two different sides.
Yeah, 3. Yeah. So Sid 2.0, still free, always free. Basically, like the alternative to Google. Yes, whether it competes is a different question, but who cares as long as it helps people. It'll present you with three political viewpoints, because everything's political these days. So let's say societal viewpoints instead. So if I type in like, is this, if I take a subject that's political of recent times and I put it in and I ask a question, it'll give me 3 narratives. It'll give me a left-wing narrative, a center narrative, and not far right, but a right narrative.
Love it.
The idea is to teach children, present children with different perspectives and enable them to use their own moral compass to choose what they believe is correct. Now,
love it.
If there is an issue around that where someone who's, let's say it's in a classroom and a teacher has an issue with the different viewpoints being represented in the chat, then there's an issue of bias in the teacher, right? And everyone's biased. That's fine, but you can't turn around to a child and say they're not allowed to look at something because it disagrees with your political viewpoint. That's quite dangerous, and the child will only end up resenting you for it at some time, or the children around them will. But yeah, it's for adults as well, because everyone's susceptible to echo chambers, including myself. Fell into an echo chamber a little while ago. It's crazy. Took my head out of it, and I was like, oh my god, why didn't I see that? So yeah, it's for everyone. So if there's a subject where, let's take the far right protests in the UK, for instance, after the stabbings of those three little girls, there's a perspective on the left that leans towards far right thugs leverage the death and dismay of children and their families in order to promote hate and violence against different races and communities. Then there's a right narrative which says people are sick to death of young girls being stabbed and raped in the streets, and this is a natural reaction of a native population against mass immigration. Then there's a centre perspective which states, well, there are points that are valid on both sides of this, however there are points that are invalid, and let's evidence-base these to demonstrate through data which points are valid. So that's about teaching like people critical thinking skills.
Critical thinking, yeah.
I know, right? So on it. Giving them like the tools to be able to understand this stuff and extrapolate the data to get their own perspective and move forward, not being fed a narrative by online misinformation, but then press misinformation, because there is also a lot of that too. And that's something that people need to be aware of. So that's going to be
well. What I love about that, Adam, is it's encouraging critical thinking, and in the work that I do, critical thinking is what protects children from predators.
Yeah,
You want to raise children who are okay with questioning authority in a polite way.
Yeah, and it's
like you can question anybody you want. It doesn't matter if they're in a uniform or they're the teacher or the coach or the mom or the dad. It is okay to have questions, especially if you're doing it in an appropriate way where you're just being authentic and sincere and wondering why they may ask you to do something or why they have this particular rule. And I think you're hitting the nail on the head with what Sid 2.0 is going to do, because it's going to put those critical thinking skills into practice. So they're going to start applying that to their immediate surroundings with everyone, which is exactly what I would want a child to do, is never be afraid to ask questions.
No, 100%. It's because the government over here, after the recent riots and stuff, they've been wanting to teach how to spot fake news and misinformation to children as young as 6 in the United Kingdom, which I don't know how you teach a 6-year-old that, personally. But there's experts out there that can do wonderful things. I know there's not enough of them. So, over here, they're looking at putting the burden on the teachers, which I think is very unfair. Because teachers, my hat's off to them, like they have a tough enough job, and to start playing political arguments in the classroom is way out of line for any government to impose on teachers.
I know,
and it's crazy. I'm not sure if this one's going to last the 5 years, but if we can give them a tool where it's like, okay, your brain may not have developed enough at 6 to be able to spot it. So you can pop it in Sid, and Sid will give you 3 viewpoints on it. And then you can go and ask your parents about it, and then you can ask your teacher about it. And you can ask your classmates about it, and your peers, and you can start to form those skills and those opinions, and have conversations about things that may be slightly politically inflamed when they don't need to be. Which is basically every single thing that's discussed today that is slightly inflamed doesn't need to be. But we've had a conversation here today, and I can guarantee you the majority of people that listen to this podcast will probably go, well, yeah, obviously it's not harmful to have the discussion about it, right? We think about it, but we're too afraid to say it. So it's time to change break those bad habits, because they're going to sink to the next generation, and we're going to have people just pitted against each other and bred that way, and we're just going to fall apart as a society. In the West, its impact on the world will start to be erased, and there are people who want that. There are people that want that, and people that don't want that. The majority don't want that, so let's not let that happen.
Yeah. Well, and neither one of us is trying to convert anybody.
Exactly. Okay, just live your life the way you want to.
Right. Yeah. Just like science, right? You're allowed to ask questions. Like, isn't that what it's all about? Like, isn't that how you get good results in the end, is by testing and asking tons of questions and evolution from your first hypothesis to where you are now? I mean, that's how we grow. But there's a lot of silencing going on in the world, unfortunately. You touched on that earlier, where people like you and I ask these things and then we're completely censored and shut down, which is truly a shame, because it's not going to help any kids, that's for sure. So
and it's kind of gotten to a point now where I think a lot of people can smell the bacon, and they're seeing all the censoring going on, which, if you go back 10, 15 years ago, I know in the UK, and I'm sure as hell in America, that when we speak about China censoring the internet, we'd be like, that's ridiculous. We never have that over here. And here we go. It's happening. I'm all for a parented internet. I think that children should have their parents present when they're online. I think there should be education and software in place to prevent these things from happening to kids. I think that they shouldn't be exposed to the whole magazine shelf in the shop. They should be exposed to the kiddie ones down the bottom with the toys on the front that look really interesting. But I don't think you should be censoring adults that have grown their brains out fully as much as anyone else to be able to look at things and form opinions because they don't fit a certain narrative. That is censorship, and that's what autocrats do. And we're not that. We're not that. No. We're here. No. I grew up with too many American movies, man. It's your fault.
I'm not sad that was the case for you.
It's crazy how much American culture has dominated English culture. It's crazy. We can't even spell ass properly anymore over here. It's meant to be spelled A-R-S-E, and a lot of kids here spell it A-S-S, which is a donkey's ass over here. So it's things like that.
I did not know that.
There's a lot of kids over here from COVID. They came out of COVID and they started speaking with American twangs and accents because they've watched so much American content over COVID that they'd lost their natural accents and they had to get them
Oh,
back.
that makes me sad. We
Yeah, but it's
love
all your
that
fault.
accent.
It's your fault because
I'm
you guys just
sorry.
dominating the media cycle for like a century. Cheers. But
Oh
yeah,
my
so
God.
it's crazy how these things can impact. But that was only a year of kids being trapped in the house, and look, the accents changed, perspectives
Yeah.
changed, everything changed. So it's amazing how much little time you need and what buttons you need to press to change an entire population's behaviors. But there were lots of bad guys in history that did that, so let's not try and be like that.
Yeah, let's not repeat history for sure.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, I mean, it's I mean, we're looking at 6:30 now. Should we call it there, or do you want to carry on?
yeah,
I
think that's good.
Yeah, sweet. Okay, nice. Well, I mean, thanks for coming on. I love having you as my second guest. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. We covered some great topics.
Oh yeah, we touched on a lot. Hopefully we've set a few people. That means we're talking about good things.
True.
Yeah, I just wanted to shout out to Andrew Briarcliffe. I'm interviewing him next, but he introduced us, and he's a really great guy. So
thank you, Andrew. Yes, he's amazing.
He is amazing.
You'll learn why.
Though, right? Is he intimidating, or is it?
I was very intimidated at first, but it's not because of anything Andrew did. It's just his expertise.
Yeah,
and
he's a super well-connected guy. Yeah.
Yes, very much so, but very approachable and super kind.
Yeah,
so.
He's a lovely dude. He's a
great leader. Yes.
Yeah, he really is. Cool. Okay. Well, I mean, we'll leave it there. Okay. And you can find out more about Colleen's organization at mbttt.org. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Sweet. In the United States of America, in Illinois?
Yes, in Illinois. Yeah.
Sweet. Okay. Well, yeah. Thank you for coming on, and I'll see you soon.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Bye.
Have a good one. Bye.